Next up is a guy who I think, when I asked him what he'd done in the army, he named about 3 or 4 different regiments and different services that he'd been in. So he had an interesting army career, and since he's done that, he's been on a huge number of adventurous exploits, and he's going to tell us about some of them now. It's Andy Torbet.
Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd normally ramble on for 5 minutes at the start, but I've got 15 minutes, and rather stupidly, I said I'd do 3 different stories, which I'm somewhat regretting now. So we're in a little bit of time pressure, so I shall crack straight on. The first one I'm going to talk about is this place in Skye. Now, I'm a big fan of kind of supporting Britain as an adventure destination and as a place for potential for exploration. So the first 2 stories are both British-based. The Coolin Ridge in Skye, a tabber's nightmare. It is just this complete labyrinth of tightly woven contour lines. And what that translates to on the ground is this. It is a 15-kilometre long dragon's back, this knife-edge ridge, 30 peaks. I live in the Munros, that's peaks over 3,000 feet. You can see 3,000 metres there, hardly. Now, the normal way to do this is in pairs, over 2 days, and you do it roped up because there's a little bit of fell running, a little bit of technical scrambling, but there are about half a dozen graded rock climbs and abseils. However, if you're reasonably mountain fit and you're a reasonably confident climber, you can actually solo it. And if you solo it, clearly you're going to move much faster, you're much lighter, there's less faff with the ropes, so you can try and do it in a day, and that's exactly what I attempted to do on potentially the only good day in Scotland of the whole of last year. So one of the major problems if you're soloing it, clearly not only the fact you're on your own, but you've got to solo the climbs. That is dangerous, but the bigger problem, in my opinion, is the fact you climb so far up, and you've got to climb back down to get your camera that you've left at the bottom to take the pictures. However, worth it. That's me at the top of that last climb is a TD gap. It's the sort of the hardest we climb on the route. And right in the beginning, and because I started before sunrise, and I sort of topped out there at sunrise. And that picture, really, you can see the phenomenal, or the route I've got to go. And that, the peak, the obvious peak in the, if I can make this work. Apparently, there's a little laser. Look at that. That peak there, that's the final peak you're heading for. So you're going to try and make that in a day. Now, as well as doing the climbs, at the top of this part here, where I am just up there, that's the inaccessible pinnacle, most famous climb on the route, you would normally abseil down the far side. Clearly, you couldn't do that. I had to down climb it, which is a little bit harder than climbing up, because you can't see where your feet are going. And then, of course, I had to then run back down here to pick up my camera. And it was an incredibly hot day. Unusual, I know, for Skye, but it was an incredibly hot day, and there is no water at all along the whole length of the ridge. So I'm carrying sort of 3 litres of water, which wasn't really enough, and I was severely dehydrated, I think, by the end of it. But the visibility helped a lot in the ability to navigate, because it's actually quite hard to navigate on this ridge. And I'll come on to the navigation problems right at the very end. Of course, the other thing, it was incredibly hot, so you try and get a little bit of shade if you want to take 5 minutes off and eat one of the 2 flapjacks that I took with me to see me through. But actually, the only place I found in the whole ridge that day that had any sort of shade was the King's Chimney, this north-facing kind of black crack, which is fabulous, because as soon as you got into it and started climbing, it felt this glorious kind of fridge. It was lovely. Unfortunately, it's not really the sort of place you want to hang about too long. So, in the end, I completed it in just over 8 hours. A tiring experience, and the main reason being is that during that 15 kilometres, you will ascend 3,000 metres. In fact, you'll also descend, obviously, 3,000 metres as well, which is the equivalent of going from the normal start point to the top of Mont Blanc and back twice. But it is well worth the effort, because I think it has probably the best view of anywhere in the UK. And back to those navigational problems, well, it's twofold, really. One, the rock on Skye is magnetic, so compasses don't really work. But I thought, I'll be smart. I'm doing the super alpinist. I'm going really light. So what I'll do is I'll put on my phone, which will be my backup camera, also a GPS. I'll put the PDF of the guide with all the top tips on there and all my OS maps. However, that phone was in this pocket just here, which is swung round. It normally sits just about there. And you'll notice the crux move of this climb is in this corner where basically you jam yourself in like that. Okay? My foot slipped at one point, and I thought, you know, that's not good. You jam myself a little bit more, and I thought to myself, and I felt the screen and the phone cracking. I thought, well, you know what? I'd rather crack my screen than plunge to my death. However, it didn't only scrap the screen, it basically broke the phone completely in two. And so the moral of this story is be careful. It's amazing the damage you can do with your left ass cheek. Okay, polarly opposite now. We're going to go from the lofty heights of Scotland down to the bowels of the earth under Wales. And this is cave diving. Well, actually, it's mine diving. There is obviously hundreds of miles of underground passageways mined out in the UK, well, since sort of pre-Roman times. Most of that's unexplored, and the deeper passages are filled with water as the old pumps were turned off and the stuff below the water table has filled up. And usually that happens slowly, and usually it's scavenged, but in certain places it happened almost instantly. What you find is these shafts are just frozen in time. This is a slate mine in Wales, near Llangollen, which they thought closed down about 80 years ago. Now, I know it closed down on the 24th of January 1938, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, over the space of about 2 years, I did this as a solo project, so it was sort of solo cave diving. You'd abseil down this sort of muddy bank with all my kit, and then you'd get to the entrance itself, and then you'd get sort of abseil down this kind of wet, slippy, jagged slate scree slope, which brings you into the mine itself, all very Tolkien-esque, mines of Moria. You kind of wave your way through to the dive site. However, you can't really do it in one trip, so it's actually 4 trips to get all my kit in there in a one-hour. And I managed to lay a line to all the passages, and I found some extraordinary stuff. Now, fortunately, I convinced the BBC to film a little 5-minute short film on this at the end of last year, which is great because I'm a pretty poor photographer, and it has allowed me to sort of show you some footage from that. So the dive itself will start any second now, and you drift down. And it started going basically 100 feet straight down, then you enter the cave itself, which actually is quite big. It's sort of arm span wide, but arm span high, so it's fairly big. But you get into these, you pass through a sort of layer of sediment, and then bang, you're in these amazingly well-preserved tunnels with the train tracks still in place. We found all footage of this just to sort of mirror what was going on. And then the carts themselves, all the carts, all the trains of these carts together, identical to as they were at the time, perfectly preserved, like almost 99% preservation, really. The old workings, the old mechanics that would have dragged the carts up the hill, steam-driven mechanics. But then I saw one of the most, in fact, probably the most emotive thing I've ever seen underwater, and I found a lot of old shipwrecks, even with human remains, but this, for some reason, was the most kind of tantalizing thing I've ever found underwater of sort of human touch. And it was this. It was graffiti on the wall. On the very last day this mine was open, guys had written their name on the date, the 24th of January 1938, at which point they'd gone home, the mine was closed down, the pumps were turned off, and these lower passages were sort of sealed under this cold water forever, and I was one of the first people to ever see that. So, again, completely different environment, and this time we're going abroad. We're going to the Arizona desert, significantly more pleasant. This was a program I did last year for the BBC, actually called Cloud Lab, where they brought me along to do some cave diving and a bit of skydiving. Now, skydiving is not what I do best. I'm all right, but nothing special. And they said, oh, great, you can do skydiving. Yeah, skydiving's fine. Go, great, well, because we want you to jump off a plane. Yeah, no problems. At 28,000 feet. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a little bit more difficult. But so that's fine. We'll give you like 8 days to train for it. We're going to do some intensive training. Not a problem. Actually, that's doable. Now, there are a number of problems with jumping out of a plane at 28,000 feet. The air is incredibly thin, which means that your normal terminal velocity when you're skydiving is about 120 miles an hour. Because the air is so thin up there, you're doing about 180 miles an hour. The parachutes are not designed to open at that speed. And if you open your parachute doing that sort of speed, you'll get what's known as opening shock, and the deceleration will definitely injure you and can kill you. People in the past have been killed by this. They've broken spines, or one guy, unfortunately, his heart kind of ripped away from the wall, and he bled internally in a matter of seconds. So, basically, but it's fine. As long as you pull your parachute before you've accelerated to the maximum speed, you're good. So you have about 5 seconds to do that. You have to open stable, so you have to open basically belly to the deck, nice like that, and you throw your chute out and your parachute pops up there. Beautiful. You go up and stable and still. What you don't want to be is doing this, because all that happens then is your parachute becomes a big bag of washing wrapped around your legs. So as I say, you must get stable and do it in 5 seconds. And it's actually harder to get stable because the air's so thin, there's less to push against. As well as that, normally parachuting, skydiving, we'd want to be as clean as possible, minimise any snag hazards. Unfortunately, they gave me this mountain of kit to carry. So I had this big sort of shelf that stuck out about a foot and a bit. And on that shelf was a GPS and a compass, because I'd been dropped at 20 miles from the landing area, because it was a high-altitude, high-opening jump, and I used to sort of parachute in. And then these like called bloody things here, which were biological sampling devices, because the idea was going to try and sample the air and what life was there between 26 and 16,000 feet. And they stuck out with big bolts as well, which was basically an engineered parachute snag hazard. As well as that, I had an oxygen bottle, a big pipe that came up my left-hand side, and a mask. I need that because at 28,000 feet, without an O2 supply, you will suffocate and pass out in about a minute. And eventually, clearly, you'll suffocate to death. However, the good news is that if you're doing 180 miles an hour towards the Earth, you will not get a chance to suffocate to death, believe you me. The other thing is, and I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but we did the jump on Halloween, and I don't know the pro or con. And the final thing is that what you want is maximum kind of dexterity to get nice and arched and stable and pull your chute. But I was wearing an awful lot of clothing because it was very, very cold. In fact, the sort of DZ commander said to me, because Andy, the worst thing about this jump, man, is that when you get out the door, it's minus 24 degrees Celsius. I said, my friend, I am from Aberdeen. We have barbecues in minus 24 degrees Celsius. However, our 8 training days, because of various administrative errors, and actually because of the weather, to be fair, became 3. We had no time for sort of consolidation jumps, and we just basically had to bang at the test jumps. So I was going up and doing the hardest jump of my life, landing, repacking, going back up to do the hardest jump of my life, because every jump I was doing was one level up. It was the most intensive and stressful days that I've had for many, many years. I was well out of my comfort zone, I've got to say. And I think I was just so mentally exhausted when it came to it. Well, this happened. I stood in the door. Get ready. Go. And I paused. And the dispatcher thought, we thought you'd just sacked it. He was about to lean over and close the door and bring me back in. And the director and the cameraman thought, Chris, all this effort, all this money's been wasted. He's not going to go. And to be honest to say, the thought never crossed my mind. I just took a moment. First of all, I think, bloody hell, I've actually pulled this off. I'm actually stood at the door at 28,000 feet. And then took another second just to go, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy this moment. Because after all that effort, it's nice to take a second and you go, you know what, this is phenomenal. And then clearly, what you do there is you jump. If any skydivers in the audience, they'll see that as an imperfect exit. I'm a little bit to one side, and I did start spinning quite a bit. But I managed to recover and open my chute on time. And people say, oh, what do you remember? Do you remember like the bad exit? Do you remember the spinning? Do you remember the tumbling? Were you scared for your life? I said, no. The one thing I remember is the earth, the coverage of the earth, and the world laid out before me. I remember the view. And it is certainly as close as an ex-Scotty like me will ever get to being an astronaut. Ladies and gentlemen, when Paul asked me to come and speak tonight, I immediately said yes. After 10 years in the forces and about half a dozen tours in bomb disposal, we clearly suffered a lot of fatalities and injuries as well. So, obviously immediately said yes, but I'd just like to pass on my personal thanks to you guys for coming along tonight and supporting the charity. Thank you.